Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, the bi-weekly podcast all around the Microsoft Cloud, covering stories from Azure all the way through to Dynamics 365. This week, David is going to be tackling three subjects. So durable task extensions to Microsoft Agent Framework, Zero Trust compliance and assessment piece that was released by Meryl Fernando earlier in the week, and the new Microsoft Confidential AI Business Professional Certification. And Cyrus, as usual, is picking up a couple of security stories. So an Intune health check, Entra protection of the passkeys, some updates in that area, a couple of CVEs that have come across his radar this week, and apparently a dangerous fax driver story, which I'm intrigued to figure out what that is all about. And I'm going to do a little bit around a LinkedIn post from Mark Rusanovich, and which will link to a further blog post from Scott Guthrie talking about some of the data center architectures they're implementing to support some of the AI workloads. I can't remember who went first last week, so I'm just going to randomly say, David, it's over to you to start us off with whatever a durable task extension of the Microsoft Agent Framework actually is.
I will. And we were just saying before we started, it's relatively slow news at the moment because we've got Ignite just coming up. So I'm quite looking forward to being able to watch and then share our favorites from Ignite. So yeah, they're not really headline grabbers. But I think what they do is sort of signpost the evolution, I guess, around how organizations are looking to build and run AI-enabled systems, over the next couple of years. And things will keep on changing, right? But it's there is some sort of logic to the reason why I've picked these things. So the first one, the durable task extension for the Microsoft Agent Framework. This one, I think technically what this does is brings the workflow and reliability model from Azure Durable Functions into the agent orchestration layer. So super interesting. For me, a few things stood out in this. So it enables you to have this deterministic orchestration model. So instead of just chaining LLM prompts together and hoping that, the model retains context, you can define sort of explicit steps, branching, retries, and parallel activities in a similar way to you would with durable functions. So the agent itself then becomes part of the workflow, not the workflow itself, if that makes sense. And that way we get things like state persistence. So the sessions are checkpointed automatically, I believe. So if any underlying functions or capability, if the function host recycles or crashes, the orchestration can pick up exactly where it left off. So you don't have to rebuild the context, you don't lose variables, so on and so forth. That in turn means you can have long-running workflows, right? You in theory, they say, can have agents that run for hours or days without consuming compute. The workflow just sort of sits there waiting, using event sourcing techniques, which I think opens the door further to the human-in-the-loop steps, approval gates and processes that will span multiple systems. So super, super useful. I think it also gives you, in theory, if it sits on top of Azure Functions or emulates that capability, then you kind of get this whole elastic scale consumption-based pricing thing along with minimized infrastructure management. So could potentially reduce the operational burden. I guess we'll have to see what happens there. And I think it also may enable this multi-agent coordination. So, you could, again, call multiple agents in sequence or in parallel, with deterministic handoff, and that potentially solves a problem we see a lot, I guess, right, where we see agents going off down their own path. We were talking about this earlier, where the agent is going and doing things that you particularly don't want. You can't control it until it's come back and done its thing, right? So we can drive that, and I think it signals this move into more enterprise grade automation, control, and all that stuff, right? So rather than just being a development kit, which before we had the agent framework, right, we had lots of these bits, and you can kind of see the evolution of this becoming more and more capable to build these agent systems that will survive failure, that we kind of, the things we care about, operate predictably. Oh my God, the words. Operate predictably, and then be able to integrate into sort of real production pipelines. So super interesting. The next one was, what was it? Oh, Zero Trust. And that, as Richard said, is Michael Fernando's blog that I spotted this on. And this, I think, helps people, because everyone says we're Zero Trust. And I think we even spoke about this the other week, didn't we, Richard? I seem to remember we had this conversation, right? And, Zero Trust for many people is a thing, right? We are Zero Trust, and it's a bit conceptual. So how do you meaningfully measure that, score against that, and then iterate against that? And, that's super important in many organizations, just to be able to say, we don't just say we're secure, we are secure, and this is how you do it. And historically, I guess, people were saying at one point, Zero Trust is kind of identity with a bit of MFA. It's not really the case, right? It's definitely not the case. But a lot of people were kind of saying that. And we look at, when we look at this, I guess we look at it from 6 different dimensions. So you could be looking at identity, you could be looking at endpoints, applications, network, data, monitoring, of course. And I think being able to have an evidence-based scoring methodology for those things, we need to add a few things to those. Like, so what about your conditional access posture? What about your device compliance levels? What about your segmentation boundaries? How do you have explicit machine and workload identities? What are your API level controls? And something we were just talking about earlier, to the Sentinel and graph, what's the forensic visibility that underpins all of that? And this becomes more and more important, as I think you should saying earlier, is that because as these agent systems become more and more embedded, they will become obviously workloads in their own right. What does that mean? That means the agents, as we know, will need managed identities or service principals. Their permissions need least privilege scoping. Oh, I'm going to go off on a tangent. There was I'm not sure if you saw it, but there was a recent attack, and I think it was Claude that caught it, but they were using Claude code. Appears it was a state actor to try and attack different organizations. So it was a very well orchestrated attack. And Claude, it's not Claude, is it? Claude's the thing. Anthropic, isn't it? And Claude, am I right? They weren't able to stop it in time, and they've had to put in a whole bunch of guidelines. So you're starting to see these new attacks using these new tools, different attack vectors. So super interesting. I probably should have mentioned that as news, but anyway. What was I saying? So yeah, the permissions need least privilege scoping, and then we need to ensure that any of these outbound calls have policy enforcement, for example, and you'd audit trails, and those audit trails are queryable and correlated and all that good stuff. I guess decision boundaries will have to be governed the same way that you govern human access. I think I've just disconnected. Are you still there? Everything stopped working, mind.
We can hear you.
I know it's. Somebody say something.
We'll hear you perfectly fine.
Yeah, perfectly fine.
Yeah, okay. And what was I saying? Human access. So without this mature zero trust baseline, I guess organizations will struggle to deploy agents safely anywhere, right? It's it becomes problematic. So what Meryl has shared is a community-driven assessment capability, and it's glorious. And he uses the same. If you've seen the Microsoft, the company statement at the end of the year with all the finances and stuff, and you've got the nice. I forget what the format is, but the layout that they use for, Windows delivered this much profit, It uses the same layout. There is a particular name to it. Excuse me, I for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. It uses the same layout, and there is potentially talk of it maybe winding up into the security center as a capability. But right now, the beauty of it being community driven is that they're being really quick and really agile in terms of updating it and configuring it and getting it to a point that it delivers value to more people faster. So I absolutely get that. And it'll be super interesting to see where that winds up. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the new AI business professional certification. And this, I guess you could look at this as it's just a AI for business users badge, right? But I think it's a bit more than that, because the exam content from memory covers sort of prompt construction patterns, right? How you do grounding inside M365, how to use Copilot to generate structured content, how do you transform documents and data sets, and how do you work with those AI outputs responsibly. So it's not, given its name, right, it's not a technical architecture exam, but from what I was reading, it seems reasonably deep in terms of the mechanics of how M365 Copilot interacts with the graph, how grounding works, and obviously what the responsible AI guidelines are. And there's quite a lot there, when you look into it. So good that we can sort of have people demonstrate that. And I think, even today, we still see quite a lot of organizations that have that bottleneck in terms of the AI literacy. Not necessarily, you've got lots and lots of technical people that understand the technical stuff, but that general literacy at the business user level, I think there is a gap at the moment, which is obviously what's driving this. And, as we know, you can deploy the best Gen AI platform ever, right, in the world. But if people don't understand these things, then, your adoption is just going to stall.
It is the age-old adoption problem. It's very similar to the whole piece around M365. I know people are going to say, oh, hang on a second, M365 is completely different to Copilot. But if you look at certainly the areas that I was working in 7 or 8 years ago, it's about getting people to actually use the features that are available to them. So they'll use Exchange because you don't have a choice. You have to use Exchange. You might end up using OneDrive because, again, you sort of been told that's your document storage. You go and put things in there. You may use a little bit of SharePoint, but you're not using the breadth of the services that are there for you. So it's a little bit like that with Copilot, I think, is that people will possibly using the stuff to do, can you help me draft this email or something?
Yeah.
Although, as we've said in previous podcasts, I actually ignore that feature because I hate the way it drafts emails, but that's because I'm weird. But that, again, we get, I don't know, X number of percentage of the population doing that, but they're not using the other functionality, which I think is crazier. And I have gone, and we were talking about this in the green room earlier on, that I have gone down a massive Copilot hole in the last 2 weeks. And some of the things that it's enabled me to do is, quite frankly, mind-blowing in some respects. I mean, it's caused me to go grey prematurely the last 2 weeks, because it also does do really stupid things. And it really struggles with CSS, as I, again, mentioned in the talk. I know I've complicated that myself a little bit, but anyway. And I've come through out of this with a sort of an idea of saying, well, actually, I should be using this more. There are things that I can be doing with this that I'm not doing. And okay, I have been looking more at the sort of code side of this as opposed to sort of general productivity usage. But again, that's sort of opened my eyes to say, well, actually, if I can do this in code, in a development project, why can't I start leveraging some of that within the sort of day-to-day sort of administrative, productivity elements? So who knows what I'm going to lose myself in over the next week or so, especially with Ignite, because hopefully, touch something, imitation wood, my work life will actually be slightly quieter next week, with everybody being in San Francisco or wherever the hell Ignite is next week. Anyway, that was a big digression. On the identity piece, and again, you mentioned we have talked about this, so apologies to the listeners who have heard us talk about this multiple times. And it goes back to the AI question about adoption, is that organizations are still, I think anyway, a little bit scared. I've seen lots of instances where there's pockets of AI being purchased in terms of licenses, but they're either that the organization seems to be concerned about how they scale that, how they expand that. And that could be from security, it could be because of identity, it could be for a number of reasons. But identity and zero trust is probably the first step on that stone to get that done. And again, I'm using zero trust probably a little bit flippantly. It doesn't necessarily need to be the full zero trust framework, but it is about having that identity layer at least to the bond that says, okay, we know who's accessing it. We know what rights and permissions they've got. We've implemented some sort of controls around that process, and then let's go from there. And that, in my opinion, is the first step to deploying this at scale. There's other things, we talked about data security. We talked about bias controls and compliance and governance, all that sort of stuff. There are other steps in the route, or whatever you want to call it, the pathway. But I think that is the first step. Could be wrong. If I'm wrong, please, or you disagree with me, please actually someone comment on one of these episodes, whether it's in YouTube or in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. Feel free to disagree with me. I'd much rather people come and said, Richard, you are talking complete and utter, word. So that we don't use the explicit or the non-explicit tag on YouTube. Fine, do it. Let's have that conversation, because I'd much rather be told that I'm talking rubbish than they'll just go nod, whatever.
I agree.
Anyway, enough of me talking. I talk too much these days, and I'm fed up with the sound of my own voice. So God knows what the listeners are thinking. Cyrus, any thoughts on what David has gone through?
On what you said, actually, Richard, about the utilization of Gen AI in the corporate world. I've seen I don't want to create weird news, but it sounds logical now when I hear you this morning and in the green room about, and also David, like few months ago, about his project he did in 1 week with AI, which could have taken normally months with developers. KPMG, and I apologize if it's not the correct company, but I'm sure it's KPMG. KPMG included in actually most of the employees, if not all, I think most of the employees, a target of AI utilization. So, because they know the value that can bring the AI, and people can be opinionated, or they can be scared of doing a mistake, or they can be scared of leaking data, etc. So, it's a weird thing that companies have to push people to use AI, because for us, we are just like, we do push hard to do more with less. So it's interesting to see that kind of rule as a target. For me, it's self-explanatory. It's obvious to use AI, but yeah, it's all the habit.
I would be really interested to see what the demographics are. Is that the right word? Across an organization for who's using the AI tools and who isn't. I have a horrible feeling that it's going to be very heavily weighted towards the technical side of the business. And I think that is because we are, by nature, I think, at least I am anyway, somebody who's always going to look at the new sort of technology or the new tooling available and at least try it. And I do worry sometimes that the rest of the organization is a little bit more hesitant about adopting. Certainly in my experience with, again, going back to the M365 adoption, they were always more reticent about adopting the capabilities that were being offered there. And, I think that's an ongoing challenge. And I honestly don't think that's going to change. We will get something else coming in 2 or 3 years' time. And adoption will be the key sticking point for that as well within organizations. Do you remember? We had this whole thing, I think, about the different generations at Microsoft about 10 years ago. I don't know if you remember it. They were saying, okay, right, we've got all these youngsters coming into the organization. We're using like Yammer, it was at the time. So they're really focused around Yammer usage and adoption. And then we've got the older people that just all emails or all telephones or whatever it was, and they were trying to try and find a way to make sure everybody was able to communicate together effectively, using the method that was best for them. And I don't know whether that ever really did anything different.
There's something also you said about copilots. Like you, and you said you're weird, but I had the same feeling with copilots and with emails writing. It's I don't know, if I send that email, someone will say your mailbox has been hacked. This is not you. We don't know that person. so there's tangible things that for the non-technical people that is lacking on some aspect, but for others is excellent. We're not completely there yet. I probably should not say that, but to be honest, and something also David mentioned about Meryl Fernando. I probably didn't know about that one, because I know there's a Microsoft one. They try to give a framework which is simplified for all the zero trust domain and make you creating a baseline, help you with some spreadsheet. I don't know why I didn't check the one with Meryl. I focus too much on Meister, but that is very interesting. So I'm going to check, because everything Meryl does for now, I'm like, it just improve what is already there in Microsoft. So I'm going to check that just after that podcast.
I think Meryl might get frustrated with us pinging him every other week, saying, "Hey, we tagged you in this podcast episode." So I might have to, I don't know, send him an apologetic note or something. We keep referencing. But it does show that the good work they're doing from the identity space. Yeah. So, it is a good thing. Right. So before I pass it off to Cyrus to wrap us up with some security news, I thought I would briefly, and I do mean briefly, interject about an article that I saw from Mark Rusanovich earlier on the week on LinkedIn. And link will be in the show notes as usual. Basically, that then redirected me to a Scott Guthrie post around some of the work that they're doing, particularly in the Americas, around sort of data center design and build patterns, specifically focusing on AI. Now, again, I read these posts and I look at some of the words they're using, like Azure AI Superfactory, and I do sort of mentally sort of age a few years, or a little piece of me dies very slowly when I hear that phrase and terminology, because it is a little bit hyperbolic, I think. But hey, perhaps I'm just weird again going through that piece. But there's again, there's another term that came up in that article, which was planet scale. And I'm thinking, seriously, planet scale? But anyway, whatever. Enough of my complaining. So basically, they built a new data center in Atlanta, which in effect has got a couple of different sort of innovations, for want of a better word, that is primarily targeted at helping the AI piece scale. So either with more, give more compute, more GPUs, blah, 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 so that we can run some of these workloads a little bit more effectively into scale appropriately. And we know that that's an issue. We look at what OpenAI are doing at the moment with buying compute capacity from basically anybody under the sun that has AI compute capacity, with the possible exception of IBM. But that might get me a black mark with IBM, which is probably a good point to do the disclaimer. Yes, we all three of us work for IBM, but the views, the opinions expressed are our own. We're not sponsored by IBM or anybody else. So there you go. That disclaimer's out of the way. I can go on. So, there are a few things in there. So hundreds of thousands of NVIDIA chips that have been going in specifically, obviously, for AI workloads. Apparently, it's a flat network design, whatever that means, but that gives ultra low latency. And, we're going on to the word again that I know that we had the problems earlier on about with the parallelism process, which again is a stupid word. I'm sorry, but it is. Now, sustainability was an interesting one in there because there is a lot of fuss, I think, and noise around AI at the moment and how much power it uses, how much this is impacting not just obviously the electricity and water usage to power some of these, but obviously the rare earth metals and other environmental impact that's been going into the GPUs, etc. So there are a few things in there that was interesting. So closed loop liquid cooling, so water reuse for 6 years apparently. So the initial fill was only 20 homes of annual water usage. And again, I don't know how they measure that. I mean, what is a house's water usage? I suspect that varies quite significantly depending on the house. Anyway, again, being pedantic. So they claim
I was going to say the US homes have very big pools, so I'm sure
do.
It's not UK home.
That could be an awful lot of water compared to a UK home.
Yeah.
Who knows? But again, I am digressing. But about 6 months or so, I think Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, was saying, okay, yeah, each query uses like a teaspoonful of water, and I'm like, what sort of measurement of that is computing power? What? Seriously, that doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, so networking. So one of the things they've tried to do here, I think, it is basically they've done some custom protocols, work on AI WAN backbones, etc., purely to speed up the networking components between the different nodes within the data center, which I suppose, again, is probably one of the biggest issues that you've got with all these multiple GPUs trying to talk to each other, manage the different prompts and the queries and responses, etc. Again, networking becomes probably the bigger bottleneck than possibly CPU or GPU in this instance capacity. So upshot of all this really is that Microsoft is claiming, and again, it's a bit of a weird one, David. Cyrus, I'm not sure if you have the same view, and it's whether it's because we're stuck in the Microsoft ecosystem that I don't see the same from AWS and GCP. But Microsoft's been very open about how their data centers are sort of architected. And I've certainly seen a speech by Mark Kostanovich, I think it was Build or Ignite, where he was talking in quite a lot of detail about how the racks are managed and how the networking goes on, and etc. Again, I don't know whether it's just because I'm in the Microsoft ecosystem that I haven't seen the same from AWS and GCP. I'm assuming it's probably out there, but I just, perhaps that's a bias from me that it's not there. And you used to, I don't know whether you can still do it, but you used to be able to actually go on a data center tour. You have to have a client and there has to be some sort of reason for doing it. But you used to be able to go and tour one of the Azure data centers. And it's one of the few things that I regret not being able to take advantage of, because I was, supposed to go on one in the UK, but I wasn't able to go for reasons I can't remember. So anyway, again, another digression, which I'm getting infamous for during the course of this. So I think this is an interesting step change from Microsoft. I think it is something that we're going to be seeing certainly a lot more from them. I'm assuming a lot from the other cloud providers, especially to keep up with the AI workloads. So interesting to see. I'll put the link to the full article. It is a very good read if you're interested in that sort of thing. And let's see what happens, and let's see whether I can then go and find similar things from AWS and GCP, which must be out there somewhere, but it just hasn't come across my radar. I can't imagine it isn't. It's just, as I said, I'm so deep in the Microsoft rabbit hole that I've probably just never seen it before. So apologies to AWS and GCP people if there it is out there. Again, drop me a comment, point me to it. Let's have some engagement around here. Anyway, and
talk about
from you, David, or Cyrus on that particular topic, I can hand across to Cyrus to wrap us up with, if my memory serves me correctly, it was some CVE news. Was it Intune or was it Entra updates, Cyrus? You have to remind me.
Both.
So there you go. I covered everything. Lovely.
Now, but I'm going to give a comment now, not on YouTube, but live. It's not your brain, Richard. It's true. Like Microsoft is actually subjectively more open about. I don't know what's the reason. If it's because they work more with governments, or they are not the primary cloud provider, they're the second one. It's like Dell and HP. You push more. I don't know what's the reason, but they are more open and transparent. I keep seeing news, and again, I thought it was my bias because I prefer Microsoft, obviously. But there was a drama in France with OVH, which is the French cloud provider, and AWS, which they copied. They criticized OVH and they played a nasty game. So that's not the philosophy of Microsoft. Anyway, sorry, I can digress too much. And I will do some name dropping. I think there's my echo. A voice echo. Some of you. I think it's David. I can hear my sound in your. Yeah, it's weird.
You guys are making me do some editing this week. I'm very grumpy.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know why there's an echo. Okay, it's okay. So I will do some name dropping too. So I will join the club of name dropping. I will give some names today, so I apologize if they don't agree, but I'm sure they will be happy. We mentioned in the podcast. First one, there's no name. It's Intune. It's quietly getting a new brain for Windows 11 compliance. So for the story, when I learned conditional access, when you do zero trust, you spend a lot of time with conditional access. With Microsoft or the equivalent in Google or Amazon. They all have the equivalent of some conditional access, how you can grant access to device, endpoints, virtual machines, or even to the platform. And it was kind of weak, the way you can mark a device as compliant, because, can I say how it works today? Most Windows compliance, they check. They're backed by something called Device Health Attestation, DHA. And at every boot, the firmware, bootloader, and OS are measured into the TPM. So DHA validates things like secure boot, if you have BitLocker, and basic code integration, which are fine for most use cases. But if you are a government entity or you have more secure assets, you can't just rely on that. So then what it does, it reports back and decide if the device is compliant for conditional access. And if you check a bit, you will see that this is kind of lax. It's really, you can't easily fake that, but it's not enough. And there's a guy, I'm going to do name dropping, I forgot. And there's a guy called Rudy Holmes. Sorry for the name. He's a Microsoft MVP. He worked for PatchMyPC. And he found something interesting buried into the Intune portal JavaScript. I like for video games, if you want to have the news of the next patch, etc., usually you grind the code, the source code. But I like to see people doing that also with Microsoft products. So there's a new Microsoft Attestation Service evaluation setting, a section that is tied to Microsoft Azure Attestation, MAA. I didn't know that existed, so I wanted to share that today. And that feature lights up 5 new Windows 11 only checks. And the first one is actually the most interesting one, is the early launch anti-malware, so ELAM. So you can now check the device that has this in place and that actually use that. In theory, And that's actually something that is demanded. Do you have that in place? Is it launched? And I can give you access or not. Very secure. The other ones are a bit nebulous for me, like firmware protection. I don't know why this is new, because you have already the secure boot and these kind of things. Memory integrity protection, HVCI, that is also used for VMs. Memory access protection, that is normally part of Windows 11. So not sure why that is here. And the last interesting one, the virtualization-based security, the VBS. So now you can create conditional access based on those. And so I try to see how it works. MAA is a modern Azure service that takes TPM evidence and returns a GWT with richer attestation claims instead of the old XML from DHA. So that's interesting because it's already used. And I think it was the first or second episode, or was probably a LinkedIn post I posted. It's already used in confidential computing. So they leverage that for this new Microsoft new posture, instead of just checking if the BitLocker is on. Really interesting. The second one is Entra. It will be quick, this one. We talked about passkeys a lot and Microsoft Authenticator, etc. And now you can use native. So until now, you use the passkeys on device bound. That's the keyword. You use device bound, and it was either stored in Microsoft Authenticator or a FIDO2 security key. So if you lose or wipe a device, and you have to re-register that key, it's very annoying, and you can do that for most of the users, but if you're an admin, it's more complex. So now it's public preview. You have now the option to sync passkeys with Apple's iCloud keychain. So that means that now if you lose your device, you can rely completely on the Apple ecosystem to give you back that passkey and even connect from your approved iPad and approved MacBook, etc. So it gives more resilience to recoverability and multi-device, so it's more comfortable. But I'm sure both of you think about that, and you'll be correct. It's also giving a lot of trust into the Apple ecosystem. So if you manage to hack through the Apple security ecosystem, you can then leverage those keys. So again, it's a discussion, lesser risk versus comfort. I have my opinion on this. Admins should keep always at all costs the annoying old school device bound. You need to think of security, and having a security it's YubiKey. So YubiKey is a brand, but there's plenty of different brands, but YubiKey is actually a good one. You use those devices and you put that in a safe for the admin in case of like a break loss exercise. But for the majority of the users, if you manage correctly the Apple ecosystem, normally it's safe because you put guardrails everywhere. I'm going to speak faster. There's 2 CVs. I'm going to do probably only one. There's a guy I really appreciate called Stephen Lim. And probably whoever follow me on LinkedIn is going to be probably annoyed by my constant like or repost or talking to that guy. He's an absolute KQL user. And importantly, I discovered that recently, he's an ex-IBMer. That's really cool. And he picked up John Hammond, is another hacker who worked, I think, for the government of the United States. And there was a research on the CV that he gave the number. It's CV 2025, 33 or 53, if I want to check. And he upgraded that hunting with some logic and match. So what's that CV is a remote code execution bug in Windows around internet shortcut files and WebDAV. So if an attacker can convince a user to open a specifically crafted shortcut or URL, Windows can end up executing attacker control code because of how it resolves file path and working directory. It's serious enough that Microsoft patched a long list of Windows versions in the June 2025 Patch Tuesday, and Checkpoints reported it being abused by stealth Falcon threat actor. So John, then what he did, he showed that something scarier. you don't even need a weird .url file. You can weaponize a plain .lnk Windows shortcut, the stuff that users click every day. So it's same underlying bug, much more natural delivery. So what Steven did, he did a response that was exactly what you want from a detection engineer. He went back, reworked his KQL, and made sure that his detection also catch John's proof of concept. So there's a lot of drama now. John made a video on YouTube about how Microsoft dealt with his discovery and didn't consider that a new CV. So there's all this drama about who found what. It's very interesting, and more interesting than some Netflix series. But that's how it should work. Together, different companies, and just patching and creating Defender XDR KQL queries. I will not do the next one. I will just give. I wanted to talk about this one too. It's for Defender XDR, but I will just give a one-liner. So you have threat analytics reports now come with a live IOC, so indicator of compromise feed. You can export straight into your tools, including Defender. So you have now live AOC. You don't need to go on blogs and copy different cyber intelligence. You can have now live into Defender. That's something that was promised, and it's in place. The last story that you going to probably interest you, and I was a bit scared and shocked, is Windows has been shipping a third-party fax modem driver. So normally, if I say fax, you should have probably seen that online. But if you didn't, it's called LTMDM64.sys. This is a driver that exists since around 2006. Like most of the driver we have in Windows, they exist since that age. So when you do like a proprietary settings, you check the drivers when you try to troubleshoot, you see this time, 2006. So most of us never had a fax modem in our machines. I weirdly did, not me, but my dad. But I know most of the people, and we didn't even use it. So most of the driver was still there on Windows 7, Windows 10, 11, and a lot of, I think all server editions, this driver is here. And researchers, as you guessed, found a serious local privilege escalation bug in that driver, tracked as CV 2005-24990. So with low privilege on no user interaction, an attacker can exploit an untrusted pointer dereference in the driver to jump to system. And it's already been seen exploited in the wild, which is why CISA pushed it into the cave list. And there's Microsoft October 2025 cumulative updates that you probably see now in your system that takes the nuclear option. They remove that driver completely. So obviously, if you rely today on the fax driver or fax modem in your device, it will stop working. But again, it's scary that we all have those old drivers. I understand retrocompatibility, but they were developed in 2026. They were not that attack surface in the world. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this one because it's actually scared me. And you can check yourself if you go to Windows System 32 driver and you check LTMDM, and it's not MDM like mobile device management. I don't remember what it meant, the MDM. It was like something else. But anyway, if you have that file, quickly update your
massively dangerous module.
That's not what it meant. But yes, massively dangerous modules.
The outdated drivers and other elements is something I think Microsoft has been struggling with for the last who knows how many years. Because if you look at one of the biggest things that holds Windows back as an operating system, holds back is a strong term, is the backward compatibility. If you look at what Apple did a few years ago, I think it was when they went from the Intel to the ARM-based chips, they did this before as well, is they basically just rewrote the whole operating system and said, right, any legacy stuff that we don't like, we're not going to support. We're just going to start fresh, and everything has to go onto the new platform. Microsoft has talked about this a number of times, and they've never been able to, in my opinion anyway, actually follow through with it and say, look, this is now a completely fresh system. if you've got a driver from 96 or whatever it is, that's been there for 20 years, we're not supporting that anymore. We are going to a fresh model. So it is one of those double-edged swords, because every time Microsoft tries to change something, they get so much pushback that they go, oh no, sorry, we're going to have to go and bring that back in. Whereas I think Apple at the time, and possibly even now, because of the way that their sort of all-garden approach works, have been able to say, no, we are not doing this now. We're going to do something new. And that doesn't work? Great, doesn't work. Fine, we'll deal with it going forward. And I think that's always been one of Windows' bigger issue is that legacy support and backwards compatibility for things that, possibly only 5% or even less of the user base actually uses, but has to be there in case somebody else decides they want to leverage that component.
I don't think it's an issue necessarily, because I am the guy who love retrocompatibility. I am, for security, I know I should not say that. That was done wisely, because normally they update the drivers. They go through, and because it's used, they have to do something. But now, because it's not used, they can see it's not really used. People still have facts, but they don't have the real underlying modems to leverage that. So they took the good decision to remove that. But there's an example. I just digress less than 1 minute. There's so as you both know, I like video games. There was a console I used to love, like Xbox, which is a Microsoft one. It changed a lot, and they used to have a huge baseline of players with the Xbox 360. And when they released the Xbox One, before they released the Xbox One, there was one sentence that was said that actually made the action drop.
I remember about compatibility, which
absolutely. I was one of them. I was one of them being really upset to say this is the difference of Microsoft versus the others. Is you have young and old players, and the old players they have nostalgia. They want the old games to work, and it worked with Xbox and the first one and the 360, and that was a mistake. And they then went back and hardcore back, and they even made an emulator into the new one, and so it's two different philosophy. And Apple users, they are more. I mean, I should not say that we're going to have a backlash, but I noticed in my own network, I don't say it's a generality, but Apple users are more open to Apple decide, we follow. It's good anyway.
You see the debacle over the Apple SOC case or whatever thing that they released this week. If you haven't, go and have a look at it. It's basically a woolen sock with a hole in it where you put your iPhone in, and they charge you like 200 quid for it. Go and have a look. That is a prime example of Apple fanboyism, because they will go and buy that and lap that up. Anyway, I am conscious of time, because we're pretty much close to the top of the hour. So I wanted to just say one thing to anybody who is going to Ignite. IBM is a sponsor, and I know this isn't an IBM sponsored podcast, but I feel that I have to sort of put this in every so often. So IBM is a sponsor. We have 2 sessions, I think, on the sort of breakout rooms. So go and have a look for those. And we are presenting on the MISA stand on Thursday as well. So anybody that's interested in that, I'll put some links in the show notes. But otherwise, apart from that blatant IBM sponsoring thing that I feel I'm obliged to do every so often, that covers everything from me. If you are still listening to this at this late stage of the session, absolutely great. Thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, follow, notification, whatever mechanism is useful for you guys on the platform that you're on. I'd like to obviously thank David and Cyrus for bringing the technical depth and the enthusiasm to this week's episode, as always. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time with a post-Ignite version of this podcast, which hopefully will have lots of new interesting stuff coming from Ignite. So that just leaves me to say thank you for me, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.